He didn't belong there, not according to the whispers, the stares, and the quiet calculations behind polished eyes. But when the chaos unfolded 30,000 feet above the ground, it was the man no one expected who stood up while everyone else froze. This is not just a story about a flight gone wrong. It's about a gesture so small it could have gone unnoticed if the world hadn't been watching. One seat upgrade, one moment of kindness, one man whose quiet dignity shattered assumptions, rewrote expectations, and exposed the invisible lines we draw between each other. Before the headlines, before the offers, before anyone knew who he really was, there was just a black man in a seat they said he didn't deserve. What happened next turned that flight into something no airline would ever forget. If you're watching this right now, hit that like button, subscribe for more true-to-life twists, and tell us, what would you have done in that seat? And where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. This is the beginning of a story that started with silence and ended in revolution. Andre Taylor boarded Flight 804 from Denver to New York with a subtle mix of fatigue and gratitude written across his face. The airline gate agent had just handed him a surprise, an unexpected upgrade to first class. Overbooked economy, they said. A little travel karma, he thought. After 3 months living out of hotels, overseeing a series of energy audits across the Southwest, the plush, wide leather seat at 2A felt like a small miracle. He sank into it with a soft sigh, folding his jacket over the armrest and placing his backpack beneath the seat. Andre, 41, was used to quiet efficiency. His job as an energy systems engineer demanded it. Calculations, corrections, constant recalibration. But lately, his personal life had been far harder to optimize. The divorce was still fresh. His daughter, Maya, was 12 and moody, and he hadn't seen her in over a week. He rubbed the side of his face, his calloused fingers brushing the stubble he hadn't had time to shave. He wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. Just survive the flight, get home, and maybe, just maybe, sleep in his own bed tonight. As boarding continued, Andre absent-mindedly scrolled through his emails, replying to 2 urgent messages from his team in Chicago. Across the aisle, a silver-haired man adjusted his Rolex and asked the attendant for sparkling water with lime. Typical first-class energy, Andre thought with a slight smirk. The cabin filled with murmurs, wheeled bags, and clicks of seat belts being fastened. And then, subtle at first, came the voice of confusion from the rear. "I was supposed to get a meal." "My assistant made sure," said an elderly woman, her voice cracking with both age and disbelief. Andre lifted his eyes toward the front galley. The conversation was happening further down, closer to coach, but loud enough to carry. The woman Ruth, according to the name tag dangling from her worn leather handbag, was frail, with short white hair and a thick cable-knit shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She leaned heavily on a cane and blinked rapidly, adjusting her bifocals as she tried to explain to a young flight attendant that she had dietary needs and had paid for a full-service seat. The attendant smiled politely, but her words were all policy. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Since you weren't boarded during the initial call, our system marked you as a late show. We had to reassign your meal to another passenger. I can offer you a snack box from economy. I didn't come this far for a damn snack box," Ruth muttered. "I'm 82. My jaw doesn't do granola bars." Andre watched her for a moment. Something about the defeated slump of her shoulders hit him. He looked down at his own tray, a hot meal with grilled salmon, quinoa, and steamed asparagus. It wasn't exactly gourmet, but it was real food. Food that warmed your hands. Food that said, "You matter." He made a quick decision. Andre stood, caught the eye of a nearby flight attendant, and nodded toward the older woman. "Can I get a tray and utensils?" he asked. The attendant blinked. "You're giving up your meal?" Andre shrugged. "Yeah, give it to her." Moments later, he walked down the aisle, holding the tray like a waiter. Ruth looked up, confused. "I believe this is yours," he said, smiling gently. She stared at him, silent at first, then blinked. "Are you serious?" "I'm not using it," he said. "And you look like someone who appreciates asparagus more than I do." She chuckled softly, then covered her mouth in surprise at the sound. "Well, aren't you a gentleman?" she said, eyes glistening. "People don't do things like this anymore." Andre knelt slightly, placing the tray carefully onto her folding table. "Some still do." Just as he was about to head back to his seat, Ruth reached out and patted his hand. "You've got good parents," she said, then paused. "Or maybe you're just good yourself." Andre smiled again, but inside, the compliment dug deeper than she knew. Good. He hadn't been called that in a while. As he walked back to first class, he noticed the glances. Some passengers gave a subtle nod of respect. One woman mouthed that was kind. The silver-haired man across the aisle, the Rolex guy, merely sipped his lime water and returned to his newspaper. Andre slid into his seat. His stomach grumbled slightly, but he felt warmer than he had all week. About 15 minutes into the flight, the captain made the usual announcements, and drinks were served. Andre ordered ginger ale. Across the aisle, the same flight attendant from before tapped his shoulder. "Sir," she said quietly, "thank you." Not many people would have done that. He nodded. She needed it more than me. Then, another surprise. The TikToker seated 2 rows behind him leaned forward, phone in hand. "Just so you know," the young woman said, "I recorded what you did. I hope that's okay. I didn't get your name, but man, it was beautiful." Andre blinked. Thanks." She grinned. "Already got like 20,000 views. I tagged it, #RealMenFly." Andre chuckled. "Guess I better behave then." Andre settled back into his seat, the cabin lights dimming to a soft, golden hue as the flight transitioned into cruise mode. His tray table was now empty. The warm meal he'd been looking forward to now resting quietly with Ruth a few rows behind. He didn't regret it. Not for a second. If anything, the gesture had grounded him in a way that spreadsheets and quarterly projections never could. Still, his stomach gave a subtle protest. He reached for the small packet of pretzels left over from boarding and opened them with a practiced sigh, crunching them slowly, more for distraction than satisfaction. Across the aisle, the TikToker, a young woman with oversized headphones and a pastel hoodie, typed rapidly on her phone, her screen brightness high enough for Andre to notice the caption. "This man just gave his only meal to a stranger. This is humanity." He chuckled under his breath, both flattered and vaguely uneasy at being turned into content. At least she hadn't made it weird. Yet, he turned his attention to the window, watching clouds drift below them like distant continents made of vapor. His thoughts were just beginning to wander when a voice pierced the moment. "Excuse me, sir." The flight attendant from earlier, the one who'd helped deliver the tray, now stood beside him with a sheepish smile. "We actually had an extra crew meal in the galley. It's not quite the same, but..." She held out a wrapped entree, chicken marsala with wild rice. Andre's surprise softened into gratitude. "I appreciate that," he said as he took it. "Really, least we could do," she replied, then leaned in a bit, lowering her voice. "Between you and me, most people up here wouldn't have done what you did." Andre shrugged. "Most people don't see her." "Not really." The attendant nodded thoughtfully, then moved down the aisle. He unwrapped the meal, steam curling from a plastic as he took his first bite. It wasn't great, but it was warm. And that was enough. 10 minutes later, the woman in the hoodie reappeared, this time standing beside his seat. "Sorry to bug you," she began, holding her phone like a peace offering. "I'm Cassie. I run a social page called Humans Over Headlines. It's mostly stories about, people being decent to each other." Andre paused mid-chew. "Sounds rare." She laughed. "Exactly. That's why I started it." She hesitated, then added, "I think you might have just gone viral." "Like, really viral?" "For giving someone dinner?" he asked. "You'd be surprised what hits," she said. "Want to see?" She turned her screen toward him. Sure enough, the video had already passed 80,000 views in under an hour. The caption was exactly as he'd glimpsed earlier. "This man just gave his only meal to a stranger. This is humanity." The comments were pouring in. People praising his kindness. People angry at the airline. People tagging morning shows and podcasts. Andre blinked. "Did you tag me?" "Nope," Cassie said quickly. "Didn't know who you were. Just saw the act." "Let's keep it that way," Andre replied. Not really looking for fame. Cassie gave a mock salute. Understood. You're just the mysterious meal hero of Flight 804. She returned to her seat, still typing furiously, and Andre went back to his meal, the taste now somehow richer. About 20 minutes passed. He was halfway through reading a technical report on geothermal viability when he felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning, he found a sharply dressed man, mid-50s, silver hair, commanding posture, standing in the aisle. Mind if I sit a moment? The man asked, gesturing to the empty seat beside him. Andre, startled, nodded slowly. Sure, I guess. The man sat with practiced elegance, pulling out a business card before speaking. My name is Henry Ballinger, he said. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for this airline. Andre raised an eyebrow. That's unexpected. So was your gesture, Ballinger replied smoothly. I saw the video. It's making its way through staff groups at an alarming pace. It wasn't meant for an audience, Andre said. All the better, Ballinger replied, leaning forward slightly. The purest acts rarely are. He paused. Ruth is my mother. Andre froze. Excuse me. Ruth Ballinger. Seat 22C. She insisted on flying without the usual entourage this time. Independent spirit, always has been. Ballinger glanced down the aisle toward her. She's had a rough year. Lost her husband. Cancer. Andre nodded slowly, still processing. I'm sorry. She didn't mention who gave her the meal. But someone recognized you. You work in sustainable energy. Andre hesitated. Yes. Taylor Systems Group. I head the Denver division. Ballinger smiled faintly. Then I think we have a lot to talk about. Our fleet's overdue for an energy overhaul, and we've been looking for someone. Innovative. Ethical. Andre held his gaze. You want to hire me because I gave your mom a meal? No, Ballinger said. I want to talk to you because that's how I found out you existed. The conversation was cut short as a flight attendant arrived with a message from a cockpit. Ballinger stood, buttoning his blazer. Enjoy the rest of your flight, Mr. Taylor. You'll be hearing from my office soon. Andre stared at the seat long after Ballinger had returned to the front. Everything felt surreal. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and exhaled slowly. Somewhere behind him, Ruth was sleeping soundly. Somewhere across the internet, millions were watching a man offer a tray of food. And somewhere ahead, maybe not far, his entire life might be about to change. Andre had just begun to calm down. The remnants of his replacement meal settled comfortably in his stomach when the atmosphere around him shifted once again. The cabin, though still quiet and dimly lit, carried a subtle hum of disapproval that he couldn't quite place at first. He looked up from his tablet and caught a sideways glance from the man across the aisle, Rolex guy, still smug, still unreadable. Then, just beyond the curtain separating first class from the galley, he heard the distinct, clipped voice of a woman. Sweet guy, she said, in a tone dripping with sarcasm. But a little too comfortable up here, don't you think? The words weren't meant for him, but they were close enough for him to hear. Andre kept his eyes on his screen, but sharpened his focus, tuning in. I mean, come on, the woman continued, her voice now quieter but still audible through the thin veil of fabric. You upgrade someone like that, and suddenly every passenger thinks this is a community flight. A younger voice responded, tentative. He was kind. He gave up his meal. That lady down there's his mom. That doesn't make him royalty, the woman snapped. This is first class. There are standards for a reason. Andre blinked slowly, letting the weight of those words settle like unwelcome passengers in his chest. He didn't need to peek through the curtain to know who was speaking. He had seen her earlier, the lead flight attendant with a perfectly pressed uniform, tight blonde bun, and a demeanor as brittle as glass. Her name tag read Maddie. She had greeted the older couple in front of him with exaggerated warmth, offering pillows and personally unwrapping their hot towels. When she passed Andre during boarding, she hadn't even looked him in the eye. He remembered that now. And now, apparently, she had something to say. Her tone grated like sandpaper against civility. I mean, look at the comments on that video. People are acting like he saved a baby from fire. It's a tray of salmon, for God's sake. The younger voice, probably Cassie or another attendant, tried again. "He didn't ask to be recorded." "Doesn't matter," Maddie snapped. "He's soaking up the attention like a sponge. Mark my words, next week he'll be on the Today Show talking about kindness like he invented it." Andre clenched his jaw but kept his expression neutral. Years of boardroom microaggressions had trained him for this exact moment. He knew the sting of being tolerated but not accepted, praised in public but questioned in private. What caught him off guard wasn't the insult, it was how quickly it had come. One good deed, one tray of food, and suddenly his worth was up for public audit. He exhaled slowly and tried to return to his report. But then came the second blow. A man from the front row, gray suit, Bluetooth earpiece, every inch the self-important exec, stood up, buttoned his jacket with flair, and marched down the aisle toward the galley. He spoke to someone quietly at first, gesturing in Andre's direction. Then his voice rose. "I'm just saying, it's not the kind of presence we usually get up here. There should be a protocol. I paid full fare for privacy, not..." He trailed off as his eyes met Andre's. But the implication lingered in the stale cabin air. "Not people like you. Not your kind of presence." Maddie nodded in agreement, arms crossed as if she'd been waiting for someone to say it aloud. The younger attendant looked visibly uncomfortable, fidgeting with the coffee service tray. Andre considered saying something, anything, but he didn't move. He knew the pattern. If he responded now, he'd be labeled confrontational, defensive, angry. He'd seen it before. The calm black man becomes a threat the second he stops smiling. So he didn't rise. Not yet. Instead, he waited, his patience a quiet act of resistance. The exec returned to his seat eventually, still muttering under his breath. Moments later, Maddie appeared beside Andre's seat with a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Would you like anything else, Mr. Taylor?" she asked, voice overly sweet, as if daring him to call her out. "No," Andre said evenly. "I'm fine." "Sure," she pressed, as if testing him. "You've been very active this evening. Some of our guests prefer to remain low profile." Andre looked at her directly now, his gaze calm but unmistakably firm. "Some of our guests should probably take their own advice." Maddie stiffened, blinking once, then walked away without a word. He knew he hadn't raised his voice, knew his tone was professional, but the energy had shifted again. It was quiet now, too quiet. The kind of quiet that felt less like peace and more like waiting for storm. Cassie reappeared a few minutes later, her expression full of apology. "I saw the way she looked at you." "I'm sorry," she whispered, kneeling beside his seat like she was praying. "She's old school. And that guy up front? Always finds someone to complain about." Andre nodded, but said nothing. Cassie hesitated, then added, "You want me to bring her a drink?" Andre frowned. "Who?" "Ruth," she said. "She asked if you were okay. She said to remind you, no good deed goes unpunished." That made Andre smile just a little. He shook his head. "She's sharper than I thought." "She's amazing," Cassie said quietly. "She told me a story about hitchhiking across Utah in the 60s. Said she once pulled a sheriff out of a ditch and got free gas for life." Andre laughed softly. "She say anything else?" "Yeah," Cassie said, straightening. "She said that boy's going places, and they better pray he remembers their names." Andre looked out the window again, the world below, invisible in the dark. He thought about that. The names, the faces, the subtle acts of bias, pretending to be protocol. But more importantly, he thought about Ruth, about kindness, and about the way a single meal had somehow made him visible to the wrong people and maybe to the right ones. Andre had returned to reading, half listening to the shuffle of carts and the occasional clink of glassware as Maddie and the other attendants completed their final pass through first class before lights out. He didn't expect the tap on his shoulder. It wasn't aggressive, but there was something sharp in the motion, rehearsed. He turned and found Maddie standing over him again, flanked this time by a younger male attendant who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Taylor," Maddie began, her voice falsely pleasant, "I need to verify your boarding pass once more." Andre blinked, surprised. "Why?" Maddie's smile thinned. "It's just a routine cross-check." We had some discrepancies in the system. Is everyone being cross-checked? He asked evenly. Of course, she lied too quickly. This is standard protocol. Andre's eyes shifted to the man across the aisle, the one with the Bluetooth and the smug look earlier, currently sipping his third scotch undisturbed. Funny, Andre said, his tone still calm. He hasn't been asked. Sir, please, Maddie said, more sharply now, her mask of politeness beginning to slip. I need to see your boarding credentials. Andre held her gaze for a beat longer, then reached down and pulled his leather wallet from the seat pocket. He produced the boarding pass, creased slightly, but still clear. Maddie took it without thanks and studied it for longer than necessary, then passed it to the young attendant, who glanced at it, checked something on his tablet, and nodded quickly. It's valid, he muttered, already stepping back. Of course it is, Andre said under his breath. Maddie hesitated, as if debating whether to escalate further. But then came a voice neither of them expected. Excuse me, Ruth said, rising slightly from her seat 2 rows back. She held onto the seat in front of her for balance, her voice quiet but firm. Is there a reason you're singling him out? Maddie turned, startled. Ma'am, please sit down. We're just verifying some information. You didn't verify my seat, Ruth replied. Or his, she added, pointing to the Rolex man across the aisle. Only his. The cabin fell still. Andre slowly turned to look at her. She gave him a small, tight nod, the kind that spoke volumes. Maddie straightened, trying to maintain control. It's not personal, ma'am. Of course not, Ruth said dryly, settling back into her seat. Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, my son will hear about this. The words weren't loud. They weren't even threatening. But something in the tone made Maddie flinch, just slightly. Andre noticed it. So did Cassie, who had just stepped into the galley behind Maddie and froze upon hearing Ruth's words. Maddie recovered quickly, returning the boarding pass with a smile that now resembled a grimace. Thank you for your cooperation, she said to Andre, before turning and walking stiffly down the aisle. Andre tucked the pass back into his wallet and exhaled. The younger attendant gave him a quick apologetic glance before following Maddie. Cassie stayed behind, hovering near Ruth's row. Ma'am, are you okay? She asked. Ruth smiled faintly. I'm fine, honey. But that woman, she shook her head. She needs to remember where she is and who she's dealing with. Should I call someone? Cassie asked. Oh no, Ruth replied, her voice now carrying a mischievous undertone. Not yet, but you might want to remind your crew that public shaming doesn't end well in a connected world. Andre, now fully alert, stared down the aisle toward Maddie's retreating form. The accusation, the targeted check, the thinly veiled assumption that he didn't belong, none of it surprised him. What surprised him was Ruth. The quiet woman he'd given his dinner to had not only seen the slight, but had spoken out when no one else would. That mattered. It mattered more than he could articulate in that moment. The man across the aisle snorted. Everyone's so sensitive these days, he muttered, shaking his head. Andre turned to him, and for the first time, he let the edge slip into his voice. No, he said flatly. We're just done being quiet. The man looked away. Cassie lingered a moment longer, then returned to the galley, where she found Maddie pacing in tight circles near the drink station. She said her son would hear about it, Cassie whispered. I think you just messed up. Maddie scoffed. What is he, a lawyer? A journalist? No, Cassie said quietly. I think he's more than that. She didn't sound like she was bluffing. Maddie bit her lip, annoyed. Great. Just great. Another viral moment we'll have to spin. Maybe, Cassie said carefully. Don't give them something to spin next time. Maddie turned sharply. You siding with him now? Cassie shook her head. I'm siding with what's right. Meanwhile, back in first class, Andre tried to focus on the data report glowing on his tablet screen, but the numbers blurred. His mind kept returning to the brief exchange, the power in Ruth's voice, the shift in the cabin air when she spoke, the way Maddie had faltered for the first time. He didn't know who Ruth's son was, but he had a feeling Maddie was about to find out. And perhaps so was he. A few minutes later, a quiet chime sounded over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin our initial descent into New York shortly. please return to your seats and ensure your seatbelts are fastened." The tension in the cabin had barely begun to settle when it fractured again, this time with a sudden, piercing chime from the overhead speaker, followed by the flight attendant's voice, slightly shaken despite her practiced tone. "If there is a medical professional on board, please alert a crew member immediately." The words cut through the murmurs like static, causing heads to swivel and voices to hush. Andre looked up instinctively, his engineer's mind trying to analyze where the disturbance originated, and then he heard it, the unmistakable sound of panic. Someone near the front gasped sharply, followed by a dull thud and the frantic shuffle of movement. A woman screamed softly. The curtain separating first class from the galley snapped open as a flight attendant rushed towards seat 1A, where a heavy-set man in his 60s had collapsed against the window, one arm hanging limp, and his face a shade too pale to ignore. The passengers nearby recoiled, unsure what to do, their privilege offering no preparation for actual crisis. Andre didn't hesitate. His body moved before his mind caught up, already rising from his seat, stepping into the aisle as Cassie emerged from the galley, wide-eyed, calling over her shoulder. "He's not responding." Maddie froze in place, her composure cracking visibly. "Does anyone have medical training?" she asked, but it was barely more than a whisper. "I do," Andre said, stepping forward. "Certified EMT. Haven't practiced in years, but I know what I'm doing." Maddie blinked. You're what?" "Move," Andre snapped, not out of anger but urgency. His voice suddenly different, firm, decisive, commanding. The tone of someone who had once worked in the back of ambulances, who had seen the minutes where life and death danced too close together. The crew responded almost immediately, clearing the area around 1A as Andre dropped to his knees beside the man. "Sir, can you hear me?" he asked, gently tapping the man's shoulder. No response. He checked the airway, leaned in to feel for breath. He's breathing, shallow and irregular. Pulse is faint. Could be a cardiac arrhythmia or early heart attack. We need him flat, legs elevated. He turned. "Cassie, find aspirin. If there's oxygen on board, bring it." Maddie hovered uselessly until Cassie pushed past her with surprising force, disappearing into the galley. Andre gently eased the man down with the help of another passenger, an older woman who had quietly stepped in to assist. He loosened the man's collar, unbuttoned his dress shirt just enough to clear his chest, and positioned his body correctly. "Time is everything," Andre murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Cassie returned moments later with an emergency kit, oxygen mask, and a foil pack of aspirin. Andre worked quickly, administering what he could, explaining every move aloud in a calm voice to reassure those watching. He placed the mask over the man's nose and mouth, adjusted the valve, and checked for color in the lips. Still bad. "We need to get him on the ground," he said finally, looking up at Maddie. "We need an emergency landing." Maddie stared at him, stunned. "We're already descending into New York. Tell the captain to expedite," Andre said, "and alert EMS to meet us at the gate." I'll go now," Maddie stammered before disappearing into the cockpit. Around them, the first-class cabin had transformed from a sanctuary of silence and champagne to a tense, makeshift triage bay. The man's wife stood nearby, clutching her purse, tears brimming in her eyes. "Is he going to be okay?" she whispered. Andre didn't lie. "He's stable for now, but we need to land." She nodded, covering her mouth with her hand. Ruth, who had shifted forward into the aisle despite Cassie's gentle attempts to keep her seated, looked at Andre with new eyes. "You're full of surprises, son," she said softly. "Just trying to be useful," he replied, not breaking concentration. "Well," Ruth added, folding her arms, "you're doing more than the rest of this damn plane combined." A ripple of awareness spread through the passengers watching, an unspoken recognition that the man they'd casually judged, questioned, and dismissed was now the one holding everything together. The man they'd doubted was the only one standing between life and death. 10 minutes later, the plane touched down harder than usual, the tires screaming briefly against the runway. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm but urgent. "We've made an expedited landing at JFK due to a medical emergency. Please remain seated as EMS boards. Andre stayed by the passenger's side until the EMTs arrived, quickly briefing them in short, clinical terms. Shallow breathing, suspected arrhythmia, administered aspirin, O2 for 10 minutes, responsive to sternum rub, vitals stabilizing. One of the paramedics glanced at Andre with professional respect. You medical? Used to be, Andre said. Systems engineer now. Could have fooled me, the EMT replied, then turned his attention back to the patient. As the team transferred the man to a stretcher, the captain himself emerged from the cockpit, nodding solemnly to Andre. Thank you, he said. Your actions probably saved his life. Andre offered a tight nod. Just did what needed to be done. Maddie stood to the side, pale and silent, her earlier confidence deflated. Cassie approached Andre as he gathered himself, eyes wide with admiration. You didn't even flinch. Not the first time, he said. Hopefully the last. Ruth gave a small clap, which startled some passengers. If that man isn't in charge of something by morning, then this airline is dumber than it looks. Several people chuckled nervously. Andre sat back down, finally allowing himself to breathe deeply, his hands trembling ever so slightly as the adrenaline faded. He hadn't done it for praise, but the shift in atmosphere was undeniable. The passengers, who had once watched him with suspicion, now glanced with quiet admiration. Even the man in the Bluetooth headset avoided eye contact as he sipped his drink. As the paramedics wheeled the cardiac patient off the plane and the cabin began its slow exhale, Andre remained seated, his body still buzzing from adrenaline. His hands were steady now, but his mind hadn't stopped spinning. He didn't notice the way some of the passengers looked at him differently now, some with admiration, some with regret. But he did notice when Ruth stood and began making her way forward, one hand gripping her cane, the other motioning to Cassie. Be a dear and get my bag from the overhead, she said. We've got company waiting. Cassie obeyed, moving with practiced precision, but she paused when she glanced out the cabin window and noticed something odd. An unmarked black SUV and two men in Navy uniforms waiting at the bottom of the mobile staircase, the kind typically used for VIP extractions. Andre noticed it too. Are we still in New York? He asked. Ruth looked over her shoulder with a grin. No, sweetheart. Captain rerouted to Cincinnati for medical clearance. Closer airspace and less traffic. Easier for my people to meet us here. Your people? Andre asked, now fully attentive. She tapped the side of her nose. All in due time. The other passengers slowly began disembarking as the crew moved through the aisles. Maddie was still pale, her movement stiff, her lips pulled into a polite expression that looked more like penance than service. Cassie approached Andre and handed him a slip of paper, folded once, her expression unreadable. From Ruth, she said simply. Andre unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate. Don't let them move you. Wait here. He looked up in time to see Ruth being assisted off the plane by the two men from the SUV, who greeted her with nods of respect and no small amount of urgency. The captain exited the cockpit and walked down the aisle directly toward Andre. Mr. Taylor, he said, extending his hand. Thank you again. If you hadn't stepped up, I did what anyone would have, Andre replied. No, the captain said, his grip firm. You did what most people wouldn't. He turned as if to leave, then stopped. By the way, MS. Ballinger left specific instructions that you not be rushed off with the rest of the passengers. She asked that we wait until her driver returns for you. Wait, Andre said, startled. Who is she? The captain chuckled softly. You'll find out. He walked away, leaving Andre more confused than ever. As the plane emptied and the ambient noise faded into silence, Andre remained alone in first class, the seatbelt still clipped, his thoughts racing. 10 minutes passed before the door reopened. The man who entered wore a crisp black suit, a discreet earpiece, and the kind of expression that said he didn't waste time. Mr. Taylor? Yes, Andre said, standing. I've been asked to escort you to the tarmac. MS. Ballinger is waiting. Andre grabbed his backpack and followed, stepping off the plane into the warm, humid night air. The runway lights shimmered in the distance. The SUV he'd seen earlier now idled nearby, its back passenger door open. Ruth sat inside, legs crossed, sunglasses perched on her head despite the hour, looking more composed than anyone who had just deplaned under emergency conditions. "Get in," she said. Andre climbed in without hesitation, and the door shut behind him. The SUV pulled away smoothly, gliding past parked jets and blinking cones. Ruth turned to face him. "You're wondering who I am?" "I think I have a guess," Andre said. "But I'd rather hear it from you." She smiled. "Ruth Ballinger. My son is Thomas Ballinger, CEO of Sky Atlantic Airlines." Andre stared at her. "As in, this airline?" "That's the one," she said cheerfully. "I also sit on the Aviation Ethics Advisory Board and chair 2 major transportation coalitions in D.C. My voice carries a little weight, especially when I tell people someone just saved my life and my company's reputation in one flight." Andre let the information settle. "Why didn't you say anything earlier?" "Because I wanted to see," she said, "how people behaved when they didn't know who I was. You saw what happened back there. That's the real airline experience for most people. Yours just happened to shine." Andre exhaled slowly. "I didn't do anything special." "That's where you're wrong," Ruth said. "You gave up your meal without expecting anything. You kept your dignity when they tried to humiliate you. You didn't snap when Maddie questioned your place in first class. And when a man needed saving, you didn't wait, you acted. That's rare. It shouldn't be, but it is." Andre looked out the window as the airport's private terminal came into view. "So, what now?" Ruth pulled out her phone, tapped a few buttons, and handed it to him. "That's your new point of contact. His name is Malcolm. He's the lead for our sustainability initiative. We've been trying to rethink how Sky Atlantic operates. Carbon output, jet fuel innovation, airport efficiency, the works." Andre raised an eyebrow. "You want me consulting on aviation now?" "I want you leading it," Ruth said. "Irrigue your résumé. I know Taylor Systems. I know you've been trying to pitch green energy transitions to companies who are too slow to care. I'm not slow. I'm here." Andre hesitated. "I have a team. A life in Denver. We're not asking you to move, yet," Ruth said with a wink. "But we want you in the room. And not just because you helped me. Because you're the kind of person this industry needs. And trust me, after tonight, my board is going to listen when I tell them that." The car slowed to a halt in front of the private lounge. Before Andre could exit, Ruth placed a hand gently on his arm. "One last thing," she said. "You changed something today. Not just for me. That flight. It showed people what decency looks like. It showed them what leadership is without a title. I've spent my whole life building things. You just proved you can rebuild them." Andre nodded slowly, humbled. "Thank you, Ruth." "Don't thank me yet," she said. "You're about to meet some people who have no idea how much you matter. Let's change that." As he stepped out into the terminal, Andre's phone buzzed. A new message. "Unknown number. We'd like to schedule a call to discuss leadership opportunities. Ruth speaks very highly of you." Andre stood in the soft lighting of the private terminal, still clutching his phone, the message from the unknown number glowing on the screen, like a puzzle piece he wasn't sure how to place. His instincts told him the number belonged to someone high up, someone who didn't text lightly. He slipped the device into his pocket and turned to see Ruth being escorted into another SUV, this one with an airport emblem on the door and a discreet escort trailing behind. She caught his eye, smiled, and offered a short wave before disappearing into the vehicle. A moment later, Andre's phone buzzed again, this time with an incoming call from a number labeled Ballinger Holdings. He hesitated, took a breath, then answered. "Andre Taylor." A crisp, calm voice replied, "Mr. Taylor, this is Denise Lambert, Executive Coordinator to Thomas Ballinger. He'd like to speak with you directly, if you're available." "I am," Andre said, though his pulse jumped slightly. There was a short pause, a soft click, and then a deeper voice took over the line, confident, measured, and unmistakably used to being obeyed. "Mr. Taylor," the voice said, "I understand you've had quite an evening." "You could say that," Andre replied carefully. "I also understand," the voice continued, that you've demonstrated the kind of presence under pressure most executives only pretend to have. I've been briefed on everything. My mother is a meticulous storyteller." Andre allowed himself a brief smile. "She's impressive." "She is," Ballinger said. "And she doesn't hand out praise easily. Which is why, when she calls me from a tarmac and says, 'I met a real man today, someone you should hire,' I tend to listen." Andre exhaled quietly. "She's very generous. She's also rarely wrong," Ballinger said. "We've been exploring aggressive restructuring across several departments, particularly within environmental operations and public ethics. After tonight, I'm convinced we've been looking in the wrong places." Andre shifted his stance, glancing toward the distant gate. "With respect, Mr. Ballinger, I'm not sure what exactly you're proposing." "A meeting," Ballinger said plainly. "Not an interview, not a pitch, just a conversation. I want to hear how you think, how you lead, and more importantly, how you keep your composure when the systems around you fall apart." Andre hesitated. "And what if I say no? Then we part as two men who share mutual respect and a memorable flight experience," Ballinger said smoothly. "But if you say yes, this may be the last flight you take as a systems engineer." Andre was quiet for a moment. "Where?" "New York," Ballinger said. "Tomorrow, noon. My driver will pick you up. Your room at the Larchmont is already confirmed. You'll be checking in under your name. No need for formalities." Andre blinked. "That was fast." "We're a fast-moving company," Ballinger replied. "My mother wouldn't want us wasting time." Andre gave a soft laugh, more to himself than anything. "All right, I'll be there." "Good," Ballinger said. "I look forward to it." The call ended. Andre stood motionless for several seconds, phone still in hand, mind reeling not just from the opportunity, but from how seamlessly it had unfolded. One choice, one gesture, and suddenly he was on the radar of the most powerful man in the airline industry. He checked the time, 10:14 p.m. The staff inside the terminal waved him toward the front desk, where a black car was already waiting with the engine running. Inside, a neatly folded itinerary sat on the leather seat. It included a hotel confirmation, a brief schedule, and a short handwritten note. "Let's build something better. RB." He pocketed the note and leaned back against the seat, staring at the ceiling of the vehicle as it pulled out onto the quiet city streets. He hadn't even made it home yet, and somehow his career trajectory had just taken a 90-degree turn. At the hotel, the check-in process was seamless. The concierge greeted him by name, offered a warm towel and a welcome drink, and handed him a sleek keycard embossed with the logo of the Larchmont. His suite was on the 20th floor, overlooking the skyline, the curtains already pulled back to reveal the glimmering architecture of a city that never slept. Andre stood by the window for several minutes, unmoving. The thought of being seen, truly seen, by someone in power, someone who wasn't looking for accolades or resumes or bloodlines, felt like a new language he'd only just begun to understand. He thought about Ruth, about how she'd read the room without saying a word, then dismantled it with one sentence. He thought about Maddie's nervous glance when Ruth mentioned her son. And he thought about the passengers, the ones who had watched him with skepticism when he boarded, then with reverence when he saved a man's life. He stepped into the shower and let the heat strip away the exhaustion of the flight. As the water thundered against tile, he whispered to himself, "Don't mess this up." The next morning arrived in a soft haze of gold and gray. The city outside buzzed gently, and Andre dressed deliberately, choosing a charcoal blazer and open-collared white shirt. Clean, but not overly formal. The black car arrived on schedule. The driver, a middle-aged man with aviator sunglasses and a sharp jawline, offered only a nod and opened the back door. As they drove through Midtown, Andre rehearsed what he might say, then quickly realized no script could prepare him for a meeting like this. At precisely 11:57, the vehicle pulled into the circular driveway of a sleek, glass-clad building that rose like a blade into the sky. The sign at the entrance read simply, "Sky Atlantic Global HQ." Andre stepped out, his heart a steady drumbeat behind his ribs. As he approached the front desk, a woman with a headset greeted him. "Mr. Taylor, she said, standing. Mr. Ballinger is expecting you. Right this way. As they entered the executive elevator, she added quietly, he's cleared his entire afternoon. Andre stepped into the executive floor of Sky Atlantic headquarters with steady footsteps and a calm exterior, but his mind pulsed with quiet intensity. The receptionist led him through a series of glass corridors that shimmered with morning light, past sleek minimalist furniture and walls lined with awards, innovation patents, and aviation milestones. Each framed accomplishment felt like a reminder that he had stepped into a world not built with people like him in mind. And yet here he was, not as an outsider, but as a guest of the man who ran it all. She opened a set of tall oak doors at the end of the corridor, revealing a room with sweeping views of the Manhattan skyline. Thomas Ballinger stood behind a long walnut desk, dressed in a tailored navy suit, his silver hair neatly combed, and his posture radiating authority honed by decades of executive command. Mr. Taylor, Ballinger said with a nod, stepping forward to shake his hand. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Thank you for the invitation, Andre replied, returning the handshake with the same even tone. Ballinger motioned toward a leather chair opposite his desk, then took a seat himself. I suspect you're wondering why I moved so quickly. That crossed my mind, Andre said. Ballinger smiled faintly. The world moves fast, especially now. You're trending, Mr. Taylor. Or rather, your actions are. He tapped his tablet and turned the screen toward Andre. The video, the one Cassie had posted, now bore a caption that read, #Flight80 for Hero, and the view count had surpassed 4 million. Thousands of comments flooded the screen, ranging from praise for Andre's quiet decency to condemnation of the flight crew's behavior. Your moment of kindness, Ballinger continued, has sparked something much larger. It's ignited a very public conversation about who gets to feel safe, respected, and seen, even in first class. Andre blinked, slowly processing the implications. I didn't mean to go viral. Exactly, Ballinger said. That's what makes it powerful. He leaned back in his chair. What you did with that tray, that medical emergency, your restraint with my mother, all of it revealed something that, frankly, our brand needs more of. Integrity, presence, compassion. Andre folded his hands. And you think you can brand that? I think, Ballinger said, we can build around it. He paused, then added, this morning I made a difficult call. Maddie, your lead flight attendant, has been placed on temporary suspension pending a full internal review. Andre didn't react immediately, but the news landed hard. Was that because of the video? Partially, Ballinger said, but mostly because my mother confirmed what she witnessed. We operate with strict DI standards, and her conduct violated several. Andre nodded slowly. I'm not here for revenge. Nor am I, Ballinger said. But accountability matters, and so does action. He stood and walked over to a sideboard, pouring 2 glasses of water, then returned to the desk and placed one in front of Andre. I want to offer you something bold. A new role. One we haven't had before, because we never thought to define it until now. I'm listening, Andre said. Ballinger pulled a folder from his drawer and slid it across the table. Inside was a single-page proposal. At the top, it read, Vice President of Sustainability and Passenger Equity Initiatives. Andre skimmed the bullet points. Leadership over green energy transitions for aircraft and airport infrastructure. Oversight on passenger experience protocols and training. Direct input on hiring policy and inclusive service design. Reporting directly to the CEO. It's ambitious, Andre said, looking up. It's overdue, Ballinger replied. We've tried to fix systems from the outside, but what happened on that flight proves we need to build new ones from within. Ones that actually reflect our values, not just what we write on investor slides. And you want me to be that change? Andre asked. I want you to lead it, Ballinger said. With autonomy, with resources, with the authority to say no when the old way pushes back. Andre exhaled, still absorbing. This is a big shift from what I do now. It's not, Ballinger said. You're still building systems. Just this time, they're human ones. The 2 men sat in silence for a moment, the city humming, behind the glass. Andre could feel the weight of the offer settling onto his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a responsibility he couldn't ignore. "What about your board?" he asked. "Won't they question this?" Ballinger smiled. "They already have. I told them that if we're going to survive the next 10 years, we need to evolve faster than policy. You're part of that evolution." Andre nodded slowly, then extended his hand. "Then I accept." Ballinger took it firmly. "Good. Let's get to work." As Andre left the office, escorted by the same assistant who had greeted him, his phone buzzed again. A new headline from a major news outlet. Flight 804. One passenger's kindness sparks industry-wide debate on equity and respect. His name wasn't in the title, but inside the article it was. So were his words to the cabin crew, his calm intervention during the emergency, and his new role at Sky Atlantic. He exited the building to find the same black SUV waiting at the curb. As he stepped inside, the driver handed him a phone. "Call from Ruth," he said. Andre smiled and answered. "So," Ruth said on the other end, "how did it go?" "Better than I expected," he replied. "He offered me a job." "He'd have been a fool not to," she said. "You deserve to be seen, Andre. Not just as a symbol, but as a standard." "That's a lot to carry," he said. "You've carried worse," Ruth replied. "This time, you'll be carrying it with backing." The call ended. Andre leaned his head back and closed his eyes. What had started as an upgrade to first class had become a detour into something greater. Not just a career move, but a legacy in the making. The SUV pulled smoothly into the underground garage of a Larchmont, the engine humming to a quiet stop beneath the warm glow of recessed lights. Andre stepped out, mind still racing from a meeting, the proposal folder tucked beneath his arm like a fragile artifact. The elevator ride to his suite was silent, and when the doors slid open, he stepped into the room with the cautious pace of someone stepping across a life-defining threshold. He laid the folder on the desk and poured himself a glass of water, then walked to the window and stared out at the city that had, in the space of 24 hours, become something entirely different. New York wasn't just a skyline now. It was a symbol of power, of velocity, of a future suddenly calling his name. He sat down, opened the folder again, and reread the title, Vice President, Sustainability and Passenger Equity. But as his eyes scanned the details once more, a quiet doubt crept in. Not about whether he deserved it, he knew he did, but whether the system itself could be moved. Whether the weight of legacy, money, and inertia could be shifted by a voice like his. Before he could spiral too deep, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. "Andre Taylor," he said. "Mr. Taylor," came the voice on the other end, female, brisk, direct. "This is Carmen Alston. I'm head of strategy for Sky Atlantic Global and Thomas Ballinger's executive liaison. I understand you met with him this morning." "That's right," Andre said. "He offered me a position." "He did," she confirmed. "And I'm calling because there's another layer he'd like to discuss, something more technical, more rooted in your engineering expertise." Andre straightened in his chair. "Go on." "Our sustainability department," Carmen continued, "has long been, let's say, performative. Reports, pledges, carbon offsets, but very little transformation. Thomas wants to change that, and your profile fits exactly what we need." Ruth made that very clear. Andre nodded slowly. "So what are you offering?" "A dual track," Carmen said. "The VP role you've been given authority to accept still stands. But we're proposing you also lead a specialized division, an independent engineering team focused exclusively on greening our fleet and infrastructure. Think carbon-neutral airports, alternative jet fuels, onboard energy recapture systems, waste-to-energy conversions, even atmospheric fuel harvesting research." Andre's breath caught slightly. That was beyond bold. That was vision. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," she said. "Thomas wants a lab built from the ground up. You'll have access to every operational layer. No gatekeepers. We've already drafted a budget." "What kind of budget?" Andre asked cautiously. "High 8 figures," Carmen replied. "Starting. Scales with progress. You'll be reporting directly to Thomas on both tracks. And the title would be Chief Director of Green Engineering. Andre stood and walked toward the window, mind reeling. Why me? Because you gave up a meal to a stranger, she said. Because you treated a dying man like he mattered. Because you didn't demand anything, but the universe decided it was time you received something anyway. And also because Ruth has never spoken about a person the way she speaks about you. Andre was silent for several seconds. This would change everything, he said. That's the idea, Carmen replied. The board's nervous. That's how we know it's the right move. He let out a short laugh. What about my current firm? Thomas already reached out to them. Your team will remain involved. You'll be dual-hatted for a while. But this is where the future is being built. Andre turned back to the desk, opened his laptop, and pulled up the schematic he'd been working on in the background for 2 years. An autonomous power cycling system designed to reduce fuel consumption on long-haul flights by 11%. No one had picked it up. Not until now. Send me the details, he said. I want to see the scope, the constraints, the personnel model. I'll need technical autonomy and full recruitment authority. You'll have both, Carmen said. We want this to bear your fingerprints, not corporate bureaucracy. Then I'm interested, he said. But I want it to be real. No greenwashing. No press releases with empty deliverables. We're aligned, she replied. That's why you're here. When the call ended, Andre stood for several minutes in the stillness of the suite. He walked to the hotel notepad and began writing names of engineers he trusted, areas where legacy systems could be dismantled, components he'd need sourced immediately. The list grew fast. It was like a dam had burst. For the first time in years, he wasn't just solving someone else's equation. He was authoring the formula. An hour later, his phone buzzed again, an encrypted link from Carmen. The preliminary resource pack, NDAs, team maps, a short internal memo titled Project CLERSKY. He clicked it open and began to read. At the very top of the document, beneath the project code, was a single line written in italics, inspired by one quiet act at 30,000 feet. 2 months later, Andre stood at the front of a high-ceilinged press room inside Sky Atlantic's global headquarters, flanked by banners emblazoned with the airline's new motto, Elevating Humanity, one flight at a time. The cameras flashed in waves. Industry leaders, journalists, and key stakeholders sat in quiet anticipation. At the center of it all was a simple podium, and behind it stood Ruth Ballinger, dressed in a sharp navy blue pantsuit with a pearl pin at her collar. She tapped the microphone gently and began to speak, her voice steady and firm. 2 months ago, I was on a flight that changed the course of this company's future. I wasn't traveling for business or politics or even luxury. I was traveling as a mother and a widow, quietly observing a world that still too often fails to see the dignity in strangers. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room before settling on Andre. One man changed that. Not with money, not with rank, but with kindness. Real kindness. The kind that doesn't ask to be noticed. Andre sat to her right, not in the spotlight, but close enough to feel the gravity of her words wrap around him like the very blanket he had once offered her. Ruth continued. That moment started a chain reaction, not because it was caught on video, not because it embarrassed anyone, but because it exposed something. The gap between how we treat passengers and how they deserve to be treated. Today we close that gap. She stepped aside as the screen behind her lit up, revealing the bold title, Ethics on Air, the Sky Atlantic Human Dignity Framework. The initiative, conceptualized by Andre and championed by Ruth and Thomas, laid out a sweeping transformation of the passenger experience. Mandatory empathy training for all crew members. Anonymous incident reporting systems for passengers and employees. Upgraded accessibility standards. Real accountability for discriminatory behavior, including immediate suspension protocols and restitution procedures. But more than that, it introduced a culture clause, a shift in mindset that placed decency and respect on par with safety and efficiency. When Ruth sat down, Thomas Ballinger took the stage. Dressed with the ease of someone who no longer needed to perform leadership, he addressed the crowd without a teleprompter. Andre Taylor didn't come here to make headlines, he said. He came here to build systems. And in the process, he reminded us what leadership actually looks like. He turned toward Andre. I invited him to speak today because this isn't just about policy. It's about people. Andre stood, walked calmly to the podium, and looked out at the sea of eyes and flashes. He took a breath, grounding himself in the memory of that flight, of Ruth shivering in her seat, of Maddie's pointed voice, of the collapsed man gasping for breath, of the curtain that had once separated him from being seen. I didn't plan any of this, he began. I didn't expect a video. I didn't expect a promotion. I didn't even expect to be thanked. The room fell completely silent. But I did expect to do what I knew was right, because my parents taught me to lead with dignity before I ever earned a degree. Because service, real service, is never about who notices. It's about who needs it. He paused, let the silence work, then continued. Ethics on air is not just a policy framework. It's a promise that the next time someone is dismissed or overlooked or profiled at 30,000 feet, this company will not look the other way. It will look them in the eye, and it will act. Applause followed, not polite, but thunderous. Andre stepped back, allowed it to wash over him, and then returned to his seat next to Ruth, who gave his hand a quiet squeeze. That evening, he returned to his apartment in Denver, where a stack of notebooks filled with sketches and ideas waited on the desk. Micah and Isaiah, his two sons, were sprawled on the couch watching the press conference replay on a tablet, their faces lit by pride. "You look serious, Dad," Isaiah said. "Like the president." "That's because it was serious," Micah added. "You just changed how people fly." Andre smiled and ruffled their hair. "No," he said. "We changed how people treat each other while they fly." He didn't tell them about the dozen consulting requests waiting in his inbox, or the invitations to speak at environmental summits, or the surprise nomination from a major civic award foundation. He didn't need to. What mattered was that they had seen it happen, from blanket to boardroom, from silence to impact. 1 week later, Andre visited a Sky Atlantic hangar in Nevada, where the prototype for their first carbon-neutral aircraft was being assembled. The engineers there treated him like one of their own, because he was. The clean air system he'd proposed was already being integrated into the wing design. Ruth joined him that afternoon, walking slowly across the metal catwalk in safety gear. "I told you," she said, looking down at the gleaming fuselage. "You were never just a man in a seat." Andre looked at the plane, then at her. "You weren't just a passenger." She smiled. "No, I was a witness. And now we're builders." The official name of the aircraft was revealed during a private ceremony a month later. Flight 804 Unity. The name wasn't about the flight itself, but what it represented. The point where compassion met innovation, and where a single quiet decision reshaped an entire industry's path. On its nose, printed in small but bold lettering, were 5 words that now defined the company's soul: inspired by someone who cared. And beneath that, a smaller line added at Ruth's request, built by Andre Taylor. The end. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for future episodes. What part of the story hit you the hardest? Was it the moment Andre gave up his meal, or when everything came full circle with the new aircraft? And where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts.